Good evening, everyone. My name is Barbara Kirk. I am one of the solicitors for Lower Makefield Township. Tonight is the first regular monthly meeting of the Township's Planning Commission. As such, the Planning Commission must reorganize tonight. So the first order of business would be to select the officers. I'll accept a motion for appointment of chairperson for the commission.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Ross Bruck as our chairperson.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion among the members? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Congratulations, Mr. Bruck. You're now a chairperson. You get to take over. So the next
Very-
item would be vice chair.
Do we have nominations for the vice chair?
I'll make a motion to nominate, or make a nomination, not a motion, nominate Adrian Costello to be vice chair.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I believe the last position would be a secretary.
I'll make a motion that we nominate Dawn Stern to be secretary.
Do we have a second? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. I believe, Barbara, anything else on the officer front?
No, I believe that's all that we need to do for this evening's reorganization.
Thank you so much. I believe our first item of business tonight is approval of the minutes of August 9th, 2021, the Planning Commission meeting from that evening. Did everyone have a chance to review? Were there any questions, concerns, corrections? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes from August, what was it?
9th, 2021.
9th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Motion passes. Jim, may I ask for your assistance on the next item up, which is Act 537?
Barbara Kirk will take over that item and run everything through for your edification.
Thank you very much.
So, as everyone knows, the township has decided to sell the sanitary sewer system, and that will occur in the first quarter probably of this year, 2022. As such, the township is obligated to submit an Act 537 plan to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, outlining the courses of action the township intends to take to make sure it mitigates any unnecessary flows into the sanitary sewer system, in addition to what we call capital improvements plan for upgrading the system, repairing lines, manholes, things of that nature. That Act 537 plan was submitted last year to DEP. As a result of the township intending to sell the system, township has to prepare an updated special study as to the Act 537 plan, which is what was presented to the board for their consideration. This is sort of similar to the study that the commission has done in the past when it involves the Neshaminy Interceptor dealing with the sanitary sewer system, Yardley Borough, things of that nature. Basically need the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to approve and adopt the special Act 537 study plan to be submitted to DEP, not approve or take no action. And that is what's asked of the commission for tonight.
Very good. And we have in attendance Supervisor Grenier. Anything that you would care to add to that conversation as well?
Excuse me. So yeah, I flipped through this document. Generally, it's a summary of some of the actions taken over the last, year or so. There is one section that I would say, I believe it's in section 7. Where is it? On page 12 of 14, 15 of 364, where there are a few statements made that I think are probably debatable, that I think should probably be revised in this document, where it's making statements along the lines of that the system is basically failing and would be too, and the reason for the sale was the cost of the system. I can fairly confidently say that the cost of fixing the source system was not the primary reason for selling the system, and that should probably be left out of this document. We had a 7-year plan from a few years ago that resulted in a 37% rate increase that was going to be flat for 7 years to cover these items, with no other issues highlighted by our sewer engineer or our auditor from a financial perspective. So I think there's a couple, that statement should be removed, in my opinion, from this document. Otherwise, it's very technical in nature, as you would assume. But making statements along the reason for the sale of the system, I think the reasons for the sale of the system vary depending on who you talk to. So I would actually recommend removing that particular statement.
Well, if I may, Mr. Grenier, I understand your position. However, this was created by the township sewer engineer, who probably has more daily hands-on knowledge of what's going on. So to the extent that there's an issue with respect to paragraph 7.3, the members of this commission can make a recommendation to recommend the board to approve the Act 537 sewage facilities plan special study, subject to those revisions as may be requested by the township's board of supervisors.
Can I ask a question? I mean, if we were to approve or vote to recommend to approve this plan with the language in it that Dan just cited, we'd be essentially, after the fact, ratifying an action to sell, or not ratifying, but supporting a position to sell the sewer system, which was something that was never before us. I, for one, wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily doing that. I do have a question for Dan. I know that this was also, the sale of the sewer system is before the Pennsylvania Board of Public Utilities. And have they acted on that yet, or is that still an ongoing process?
It's an ongoing process, and the solicitor can correct me if I misspeak here, but I believe the major, I don't want to call it the first step, but the major hurdle allowing the sale to move forward was met in the September-October timeframe, if memory serves. It's still not closed by any means. That's in the next few months. But so it's not a sale is not final, as our solicitor stated. Closing will come sometime in the first quarter, early end of first quarter. But the regulatory hurdles, as I understand them, are basically have been overcome. They just are going through the process. Was that fair, Barbara?
Yes, it is, because they had the initial hearings back, like you said, I don't recall, September, October-ish, as to whether or not this was something that the PUC would approve. They've done all those regulatory hearings, and I believe an opinion was rendered by the PUC, and they're now at the stage of supplementing and providing the PUC with the specific information that is going to be necessary for the sale. So by way of an example, our offices aren't directly handling the sale issue. There's special counsel that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors when this started, and he's doing it, but I'm doing some of the background work, which is like gathering the outline of all of the property interests so that easements where the sewer lines are can be conveyed to the buyer and things of that nature. So all that information will have to be submitted to the PUC for review and approval, and that's what's going on as part of this process before final closing. And again, it's the commission has three choices, either recommend for the board to adopt and submit this special study, recommend that the board deny or not adopt and submit the special study, or take no action. As I understand, a updated report needs to be submitted to DEP in anticipation of the sale occurring. If something happens and the sale does not get finalized, obviously a new special study would have to be submitted to DEP. But I think this is part of the township's regulatory process and keeping DEP informed as to how the township handles the discharge and disposal of sanitary sewage.
So I guess to help the commission here a little bit, Jim, previous, we've done Act 537 plans before. And Act 537 plans have come before the Planning Commission before, or no?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's my understanding is it's keeping in line with other Act 537 plans. Obviously, other Act 537 plans were how we were going to implement various improvements to the system over time under our ownership. This is more of this has a different theme to it, but it's because it's being sold. But it's more focused on how this moving forward with the sale, what that means to the system versus what we're going to do as a township to improve it. Is that fair, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Am I on mute?
You're good.
Okay. I just want to be clear in terms of what our role is here. This is not I think this goes back to something Tony said. This is not correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara. We're not here to approve whether or not we agree or disagree with the sale. This is just the Board of Supervisors already decided to sell this, and this is just us determining whether this 537 plan is accurate or we see issues with this specific 537 plan. Is that correct?
Correct. So this report is essentially an addendum to the original 537 plan that the township filed with the DEP that's being prepared because the township does not intend to retain ownership of the system, and therefore we're not in the future going to be obligated to maintain the system and comply with DEP regulations. This is the update to DEP to explain what's going on with the system.
Right. Okay. So I just want, our decision here and what we recommend to the Board of Supervisors has nothing to do with whether or not we agree with their decision from last year. It just says, as part of this process, given that they've decided this, we're just giving our okay or no opinion or not okay to whether or not this 537 plan is appropriate for what the township's trying to do.
Correct. And again, to the extent that there are things that might need to be revised based on perception or wording, this board could recommend approval subject to those revisions that the Board of Supervisors deems necessary and appropriate. That's an option that you have.
Colin, TJ, did you have comments?
Oh, nothing really. I mean, I agree with, Adrian and somewhat with Anthony, but it seems more of a procedural type of process and vote. So I'm okay.
I think with respect to the status of the condition of the sewer system in LMT, somebody was talking about that earlier.
Mr. Granger was, that he didn't believe the description of the system being in a failing condition was accurate, that there had been, the township had made plans in the future of what to do to make repairs in order to maintain the system in good operating condition. So to the extent that there might be language saying it's a failing system, again, you can recommend approval subject to those revisions that the Board of Supervisors deems necessary and appropriate.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Also, unfortunately, my my plan was cut off the last 3 pages. Was there something in here about anything to do with the rate structure?
That's subject to the PUC approval, subject to the requirements set forth in the asset purchase agreement between the township and the buyer.
If we take no action, if we vote to neither approve nor deny, would somebody care to walk me through the ramifications of that for the board or for their future review? The third option that Barbara described.
So if I may, this board is a wholly advisory board. Your function is to review those things that deal with generally zoning issues on a certain respect in subdivision and land development, but there are other things such as studies of this nature that come before you in an advisory capacity. And as such, this board makes recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, who are the ultimate governing body, as to whether this study should be approved. Should it be sent back to have it reviewed again? Should there be revisions to it? Don't submit it, that type of thing. So you're providing an opinion as to what should be done to this study to the Board of Supervisors, who ultimately make the decision as to whether or not the study gets submitted to DEP, needs to be amended or revised, or that type of thing. So your decision is not going to necessarily prevent the Board of Supervisors from either hearing or reviewing or making a decision as to what happens with this special study.
Thank you, Barbara.
So the way I look at this, I think there's 2 different pieces. One is this whole thing is not necessarily, the entire scope of the document is not necessarily the purview. Every point of this isn't the purview of the Planning Commission, but there are pieces of it that are directly related to the things we discuss on a regular basis. Like planning, for future capacity needs, things like that, right? For new developments that we might be approving, at least coming in front of us. And I think we should focus on the few items, whether we vote yes or no, or specific changes, we should focus on those. Then if we have other recommendations, like if there are things we see, to use the example Dan gave, if there are things in here that sort of raise our eyebrows, but we're not necessarily the ones who are directly involved or have direct knowledge of all the ins and outs of, in this case, the actual situation with the sewer system and what state of repair or disrepair it was in, we can certainly recommend to the supervisor, say, on this action, I would go back to the proper party. In this case, it might be the sewer engineer, and get clarification on this before you finalize it. But I don't think we can say whether or not that's wrong. This has never been in front of us as a board before. I mean, we may have some of us may be more familiar with this and others may have opinions on it, but as a planning commission, I'm not sure on that particular issue that Dan brought up. We have an expert perspective on it. Am I making sense at all?
And Mr. Grenier can correct me, but the issue of whether to sell the system or not had gone in front of the Board of Supervisors after numerous, I guess, special group studies, if for lack of a better term, looking at the various alternatives that have been outlined in the report on page 10. And as I understand, even though I was not present for that supervisors hearing, I think all of the issues were thoroughly discussed and vetted, and everybody had their opinion as to what should happen with the system, of which ultimately it was decided to sell the system. I don't know if it was just one supervisors meeting or if it were several, but I know it was a fairly extensive process. It didn't sort of happen overnight type of thing.
Yeah, so just to add to just to clarify that, the alternatives that were reviewed were not the alternatives for the system itself. The alternatives that were reviewed were potential new treatment systems. Those were vetted by our sewer subcommittee. That was a subcommittee to the sewer authority. I sat on that subcommittee and was on the sewer authority as the sewer authority liaison. So there were extensive studies before this came about. The sale option came about to vet particular options, let's say, or alternatives to deal with the new Morrisville municipal plant. And that was over the course of about a year. When the sewer system, when our township manager proposed the sale of the sewer system after raising rates to 37%, those studies stopped. And then this sale of the sewer system was something that was, that's when PFM and Obermeyer came in, and then they decided to sell the system to Aqua. Not all of these alternatives that were shown here, and they're very, the details are obviously not provided. They're a sentence or two long each, were vetted or discussed in great detail. It was primarily, when it comes to the alternatives, it was the alternatives that were presented were who's going to buy it and for how much. That's what we discussed at the supervisor meetings. And then it was, just to finish the story, there was a vote to sell to Aqua, but there wasn't a two-part vote, one to sell the system and then to sell to Aqua. It was a one vote to just sell directly to Aqua. As some public documents have stated, that it was a two-part vote where we decided to sell the system, then specifically decided to sell the system to Aqua. That's not how the vote occurred. It was just because I personally recused myself from voting for a specific seller, and I never got to vote on anything. That's how I'm keenly aware of that one. So I don't know if that clarifies anything for you, but that's sort of the short version of the process.
But overall, it was somewhat of a lengthy process from start to finish.
Yeah, I believe the process to sell the system, there were 10 meetings, 10 executive sessions between April and June of 2020. And then there was going to be a vote in July of 2020, but due to a lawsuit that was postponed till early to mid-August of 2020, that's when the vote occurred. And then it went, the vote occurred, I believe, second meeting in August, if memory serves, maybe first meeting in September, but I believe the second meeting in August. And then things moved forward. So really it took a long time to get information from PFM and Obermeyer. So that was presented in executive sessions over the course of a couple months between April and June. Then there was one, maybe two meetings where they actually presented with Aqua and the other proposers before a vote was taken.
So with the possible exception of section 7, which Supervisor Grenier has highlighted, putting that aside for a moment, I don't feel I have information that would lead me towards not recommending it and supporting it, or making a motion or supporting such a motion. But I also don't feel that I've had, prior to this evening, sufficient time to review, in light of this conversation, to make a recommendation in favor of approving this. But I'd like to hear from the other planning commission members if you feel otherwise, and if persuade me if I should reconsider, or if you feel strongly one way or the other.
But again, we're not voting on the actual sale, correct? We're just voting on this document of the review.
Yes.
Yes.
And
So whatever the sewer, I guess the person that was in the sewer department or the engineer that put this report together, that's all we're basically recommending for approval.
correct. Dawn, you were on mute before, or you still are?
Yeah, I was just saying that I think for me, it's, I mean, too much of this predates me to make a informed decision about anything to do with the sewer situation, to be honest with you.
Ross, I tend to agree with what you had said about potentially not having enough information here. There's a lot here about just, looking at the current condition, evaluation of alternatives, selection, existing sewage facilities. This is the first time we've seen this. We haven't heard from anybody about it really. First time we've seen this plan, I should say, this amended 537 plan or study. And we really haven't heard any of the details behind it, other than what Dan has shared with us this evening, which has been helpful, I think. But there's a lot more to it, and a lot of it is pretty technical, and we're being asked to make a recommendation on it. I guess if we do punt to another meeting, how much time, is there a time deadline for our board to make a recommendation one way or the other?
I thought that they were hoping a recommendation could be made by the board so that it could be given to the Board of Supervisors for the next meeting, which would be next week, Dan?
The 19th, I believe, is our next meeting.
Okay.
Is there any
Yeah.
consequence to this moving to another meeting after that?
I don't know offhand, other than the fact that I know that the sale is being hopefully scheduled. So I guess depending on how quickly the wheels turn at DEP, I think the gist with everything going on would be this, to get it to the DEP if necessary, sooner rather than later.
Is there any way that someone can get us like a some
Summary?
sort of, yeah, of what went on in past meetings and votes and whatnot?
As to what happened in prior meetings dealing with the sale issue, or why this is coming to the Planning Commission to look at?
Well, I think the sale issue, as the background, of course. I personally just don't know enough about the background.
I guess I still question for the purposes of this. I mean, look, I'm not saying we shouldn't have the background, but I'm not sure that's like a showstopper. We have a document that has information in there and that we might not have time to parse through. It was a big document this weekend when I opened it up.
Mhm.
Trying to get through that and trying to absorb and trying to figure out what are the things that are pertinent to me as a planning commission member. So I'm not saying I'm not saying one way or another whether we're necessarily ready to take a vote or not tonight, but the background of who voted for what, the rationale for voting the sale, the way I look at it is that ship is kind of passed, and the Board of Supervisors has said, we're selling and we need this document in here. We need your input to make sure that this document, from your perspective as a planning commission, accurately reflects or is sufficient and doesn't cause additional concern that we might have already had, to the sewer system and from a planning commission perspective.
So would it make more sense then, reading the room, that a approval seems unlikely, rather than asking for more time for the planning commission to come back at a future meeting to review with additional education, additional background information, would it make more sense instead to issue a no recommendation to the Board of Supervisors? Allow the Board of Supervisors to take it up as they see fit at their next meeting. And if they believe that a more information from the planning commission is necessary, punt it back to us at that point. That way we're not delaying them in their due course.
And I would be fine with that, because like to your point earlier, like this is a big township project, but us as a planning commission, this is just a statement of fact. I'm not passing judgment on it, but we haven't really been involved in it before. So we haven't had a lot of discussion about this. So it's kind of hard to say, okay, here's a 100-page document, you get on Friday and let's have a meeting and make a substantive decision about it. But since we're so far in the process, in my going through perusing it today for an hour or two, I didn't see anything that would make me raise my hand and say, whoa, hold, stop the vote. So if we vote like, okay, we're not going to recommend or we're not going to recommend either way, and, give it to the Board of Supervisors to make their call. If they want us to look at it further, to your point, Ross, then we can go and have a little bit more time and maybe kind of get some summaries on some key things on what we need to deep dive into.
Yeah, I think that's in line with what I was thinking.
Makes perfect sense, especially since this board has not been actively engaged in reviewing everything relative to the sale anyway. So you've done bits and pieces of things, but not the entire package.
Yeah, and if we were to make a decision one way or the other, my concern would be, yeah, Adrian, I agree. I read through it and there was no big alarms, but I fear that I missed something that I don't want to necessarily show support for or show a lack of support for. I'm more agnostic at this point in time.
And I guess I would ask this question of the two experts we have here, Jim and Andy. Like, are there anything from your perspectives in this document that you think we should be kind of digging into, or that you're concerned about, or are you kind of like, from your perspectives, are you comfortable with everything in there?
If I may, the Planning Commission's role in Act 537 planning generally is sort of limited to, is what is being proposed consistent with the comprehensive plan, land use planning, and zoning? So for instance, if this plan contemplated changing our zoning from R1, like 1 acre lots, to being high density apartment complexes with high rises, and building a new sewage treatment plant to accommodate that, that obviously would generate your comment that we don't believe that this is consistent with our comprehensive plan and our land use planning and zoning. And I believe nothing in the document actually changes the way that we're looking at our planning of the community for the sewage needs of the community and our land planning and our zoning. It's just a change in ownership, operations, and maintenance of our sewer system.
Jim, I thought that was real helpful, what you just said. I mean, I for one didn't look at this with the eye towards, is this consistent with the master plan? I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. And I guess the question is that's more of a political question than a factual question. Potentially in some people's eyes. I tend to agree with Adrian and Ross that we not make a recommendation at this time.
Do you forgive me for a while since I've been chair? Do we need to take public comment, or do you make the motion first?
Take a motion first with a second, and then public comment would probably be
Thank
the
you, Barbara.
wisest.
Okay. Tony, would you care to make a motion of that?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we make no recommendation to the Board of Supervisors concerning the Act 537 plan special study sale of the sewer system.
Or a second?
I'll second that.
Any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Okay. We've done nothing so far, apparently. Next up on the agenda is
Done it so very well.
1566 LLC Major Subdivision. This is for a future agenda, but Jim, this was just brought to our attention today.
Yeah, basically the time clock for a subdivision for approval is 90 days from the date after the first planning commission, after the plans are submitted. We just received the plans on Friday, and the first planning commission, obviously, first planning commission meeting is tonight. Therefore, I just want to put this on the clock and on everyone's radar. The plans are posted on our planning commission webpage for the general public to take a look at. We also have hard copies available here in the township building for anyone who may have any interest. And as you note on the agenda, it does give just a brief description of what is being proposed for this piece of property, consolidating of several lots, removing a few existing homes, and then re-subdividing it to create 4 new houses in addition to the reconfiguration of the other 2. So 6 new single-family lots with 1 remainder lot containing the existing house and ponds that are off of Yardley Newtown Road, or Newtown Yardley Road. And so no action is needed by our planning commission. It's just an advisement that these plans are coming forward. I did forward this to the planning commission, also to our reviewers for our consulting engineers and other consultants, and also to our volunteer committees who have a review role in the process. And we should have those comments back within 30 days, in which case the applicant will either make revisions of the plans and come back, or maybe come in front of the planning commission to review certain aspects of the plan. I am going to try to create a site visit for the property. I think in this case, this will be helpful so everyone can get an idea of what's on the property, where these proposed lots are going, so we can take a better look at how this works out from a planning perspective. And that's all.
So is there any way we can push it back to like April when the weather's warmer for a site visit?
Not tomorrow.
No.
Very good.
Jim, whoever the developer is, seriously, I'm saying this sort of funny, but I'm being serious. Tell them do not put a variance request for the tree ordinance on there. Either pay the money in the plan or put the trees in.
Well, I think that's something we could definitely let their engineer know about.
Yeah, I'm not gonna listen to it again.
Those be native trees, Adrian?
I'm not gonna get on that one yet. I just, seriously, we have an out for them. If they want an out, pay the money. If they don't want to pay the money, then plant the trees. One of the 2 things. There's no reason for them to be asking for a variance request for that particular one, because we already have in our ordinances what to do if they can't do one.
Do we
You're on
know,
notice.
do we know of the variances that they're requesting?
I didn't see it. I didn't note any as I was
Okay, yeah,
scanning through it. I had no
Just
idea.
on, just on guard for it. Understood.
Yeah, that's all. It's one of those things we as a township need to just start telling people that. Just enough. It's just a waste of time.
Just on a cursory review, there's one item that I would want to bring up to the planning commission to see, kind of get your feel on it. The 4 homes along the back of the property line that would access off of Buck Creek Drive, a little extension that has a cul-de-sac on the northern portion of the property. They have a lighting plan. It's actually the last sheet of the set that was submitted, page 19 of 19, where they have 4 street lights along the cul-de-sac there. There's no street lights along Buck Creek Drive, to my knowledge, just in looking through Google Earth. 4 street lights seems excessive for that neighborhood. Is that something that I suspect that they put that in there because of an ordinance requiring streetlights every so many feet?
Actually, Andy, streetlights are not required. I believe we require them for multifamily developments where it makes more sense due to the density of people and the walking around on sidewalks. So I don't know why they put that in. I know for the most part, the town has discouraged streetlights in most low-density type of applications. So that's something that the Planning Commission could certainly weigh into and on when it eventually comes in front of them.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you for mentioning that. The one other item on our agenda was the draft of the 2021 Planning Commission Annual Report. Did everyone have a chance to review that? Does anybody have corrections, concerns, questions? Barbara, that is another item that we need to approve, yes?
Yes.
If there are no concerns, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. That report, once it's just finalized, will be posted on the Planning Commission webpage. And we also should owe some thanks to a former Planning Commission member, John Tracy, who brought it to our attention that the township had never done a Planning Commission annual report as is required by the municipality's planning code. So we had to go back and do 10 years worth of reports to be in compliance.
Jim, does this also get filed with the Bucks County Planning Commission?
I don't believe so.
Other business?
If I may.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if you realize, but I am your liaison again. I was going to send an email out to everyone. We didn't get to meet as much this past year as previous years probably, but I was going to send an email out to everyone saying thank you and wishing you a happy new year. But our liaison assignments go unchanged this year. So you're, for better or worse, you're stuck with me for another year.
Well,
So,
thank you for your
looking forward
service.
to it.
Yeah, thank you for your service in 2021, and we look forward to working with you in 2022. And as Jim said, we'll probably be meeting more than we did last year, so we're looking forward to it.
Right back at you. Thanks.
There was no public comment on the Act 537, but are there any other public comments before we adjourn?
No public comment.
Thank you very much. Motion.
Ross,
Yes,
just
sir.
Quickly before we adjourn, quick question. Something that think we dealt with in 2020, and I wasn't sure if we're going to pick it up, were the design guidelines this year.
Yes, that actually was something that I had planned to do last week and have it on this meeting, but unfortunately I was out sick last week, so that did not get done. But that will be coming up to be finalized very soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Roll Tide.
Passes. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Go